Part 1, The Underdog Introduction. The breakfast rush at Riverside Diner hadn't slowed since 6 a.m., and Sarah Chen's feet screamed with every step across the greasy linoleum floor. Her ponytail, hastily thrown up at 4:45 that morning, had come loose, sending strands of black hair into her face as she balanced 4 plates along her arms. The coffee stain on her uniform had happened during the first hour, a hazard of the job she'd held for the past 18 months since the divorce. "Order up for table 12, she called, sliding pancakes and eggs in front of a group of construction workers. One of them, barely looking up from his phone, grunted what might have been thanks. Sarah forced her trademark smile, the one that earned decent tips despite everything else in her life suggesting she had nothing to smile about. Her phone vibrated in her apron pocket. School, the screen showed. Her stomach clenched. Which of her 3 kids was it this time? "Sarah, tables need turning," barked Gary, the manager, a man whose empathy had been surgically removed sometime in the 90s. She nodded, already moving, but grabbed a moment to check the message. "Ms. Chen, please call regarding Lily. Incident in cafeteria." Lily. Her youngest at 8, the one who'd taken the divorce the hardest. Sarah closed her eyes briefly, calculating whether she could afford to leave early. The answer was always no. "Excuse me, miss. More coffee. Table 6. Sarah grabbed the pot, her mind racing through possibilities. Had Lily gotten into another fight? Refused to eat again? The school counselor had used words like adjustment disorder and behavioral concerns, as if Sarah needed clinical terms to understand her daughter was hurting. Between refills, she stole a glance at her phone. 11:47 a.m. If she worked through lunch, maybe Gary would let her leave by 2:30 to make the school meeting. That would mean missing the dinner prep shift, which meant losing $60 she desperately needed for Emma's volleyball fees. Emma, her eldest at 14, had inherited her father's height and athletic ability, the only useful things Richard had passed on before trading his family for a 25-year-old yoga instructor named Brittany. The child support checks came sporadically, usually with excuses about cash flow issues, despite Richard's new Tesla and beach house posts on Instagram. "Sarah." Gary's voice cut through her calculations. "Personal time is break time." She pocketed the phone and returned to the endless cycle of pour, serve, clean, repeat. Table 12 was ready to pay. She processed their credit card on the ancient machine that worked half the time, smiled at the 10% tip, less than standard but better than nothing, and bussed their dishes. The weight of the tray made her shoulder ache. 36 years old and she felt 50. The divorce had aged her in ways that went beyond the crow's feet and the gray hairs she could no longer afford to color. It was in the bone-deep exhaustion, the constant mental math of bills versus income, the way she'd learned to make a pound of ground beef stretch across 3 dinners. Her son Jake, 12 and too perceptive for his own good, had stopped asking for things. He'd noticed how she flinched at school supply lists, how she'd suggested he might outgrow basketball when the league fees came due. Last week, she'd found him teaching himself to sew to fix his torn backpack rather than ask for a new one. "Chen, phone." Gary called from the kitchen. Sarah's heart sank. Personal calls were forbidden during shifts unless it was an emergency. She hurried to the back, taking the receiver with trembling hands. "Miss Chen. This is Principal Hoffman. We need you to come collect Lily. She's had an episode." Episode. Sarah gripped the phone tighter. "Is she hurt?" "She's physically fine, but she locked herself in the bathroom stall and won't come out. She keeps saying she wants her daddy. We've tried." "Her father lives in California now," Sarah interrupted, the words bitter on her tongue. I'll be there as soon as I can." She hung up and found Gary watching her with arms crossed. "I have to go. My daughter. 3rd time this month, Chen. I got a business to run." "I know. I'm sorry. I'll make it up. By finding another job. Clear out your locker." The words hit like physical blows. Sarah stared at him, waiting for the punchline that didn't come. 18 months of perfect attendance despite sick kids, despite court dates, despite her life crumbling piece by piece, and it ended with 5 words. She untied her apron with numb fingers, emptied her tips, $37.50 for 7 hours of work, and gathered her things. The other waitresses avoided eye contact. They all lived one crisis away from her fate. The drive to Westside Elementary took 12 minutes. Sarah spent them fighting tears that would only upset Lily more. Sarah found Lily curled in the corner of the bathroom stall, her small body shaking with silent sobs. The principal, 2 teachers, and the school counselor stood outside looking helpless, a collection of advanced degrees defeated by an 8-year-old's grief. "Baby," Sarah whispered, crawling under the stall door in her waitress uniform, not caring about the filthy floor. "I'm here." Lily launched herself into Sarah's arms. Megan said. "She said I can't go to her birthday because her mom doesn't want divorce germs at her house." Sarah's chest tightened with rage she couldn't afford to show. She stroked Lily's hair, inhaling the strawberry scent of cheap shampoo. "Megan's mom is confused, sweetheart. Divorce isn't contagious." "Then why does everyone act like it is?" The question hung in the air as Sarah carried Lily past the assembled educators, their pitying looks following her down the hallway. In the parking lot, she buckled Lily into the back seat of their aging Honda Civic, a car that needed new brakes she couldn't afford, and caught her reflection in the rearview mirror. When had those lines appeared? When had her eyes gotten so hollow? Her phone rang. Richard's ringtone, a choice she kept to remind herself why she'd left. She let it go to voicemail, but he called again immediately. "What?" she answered, exhaustion replacing courtesy. "I heard you got fired," his voice carried that familiar blend of condescension and false concern. "Sarah, this is exactly what I was talking about in the custody filing. Unstable employment, the kids acting out. Custody filing." The words came out sharper than intended. Lily's eyes widened in the back seat. "My lawyer will be in touch. Brittany and I have a stable home. The kids need structure, not a mother who can't hold down a waitressing job." Sarah ended the call before she said something that would be used against her in court. Her hand shook as she gripped the steering wheel. Legal fees. She'd need legal fees. She didn't have to fight a man who'd abandoned them 18 months ago. The drive home revealed more problems. An eviction notice tucked under the apartment door. She was 45 days behind on rent. The electricity bill marked "Final Notice" in red. Emma's volleyball coach had left a voicemail about discussing payment plans in a tone that suggested Sarah's daughter would be benched without immediate payment. Jake emerged from his room as they entered, took one look at Lily's tear-stained face and Sarah's expression, and quietly started making peanut butter sandwiches. Her 12-year-old son had become the family's emotional barometer, reading moods and diffusing tensions with a maturity that broke Sarah's heart. "Lost my job," Sarah said simply, collapsing onto their second-hand couch. The springs creaked ominously. Jake paused in his sandwich making. "The car place is hiring." "I could." "You're 12. I look 14. Jake." "I know," he returned to the sandwiches, cutting Lily's into triangles the way she liked. "Emma's at practice. Coach drove her." Sarah nodded, grateful for small mercies. She'd have 2 hours before facing her eldest daughter's questions. Emma had inherited Richard's pragmatism along with his height. She'd want to know the plan, the budget, the timeline for fixing this. Sarah had no answers. Her phone buzzed. A text from her brother Michael, "Heard about Dad. Funeral Thursday 2 p.m. Try to look presentable." Sarah stared at the message. Her father. Henry Chen. Dead. The words didn't compute. She'd spoken to him just. When? 2 weeks ago. 3. Time blurred when every day was survival. Another text from Michael, he was living at that motel. Pathetic end. At least he had life insurance. The Seahorse Motel. Sarah knew it, a decaying relic of Highway 91 that her father had bought in the 80s during his brief flush period before bad investments drained everything. Last she'd heard, he'd been living in the manager's unit, too proud to accept help, too stubborn to sell. Her sister Grace's message came next, "We're something nice. The Yamadas will be there." The Yamadas, Grace's in-laws, who owned a chain of successful restaurants and never let anyone forget it. Grace had married well, as she reminded Sarah at every opportunity. Michael had his tech startup. And Sarah? Sarah had 3 kids, no job, and $47 in checking. The funeral meant gas money, appropriate clothes, time off from job hunting. It meant facing siblings who'd written her off when she'd chosen single motherhood over staying in an abusive marriage. It meant their pitying looks, their subtle comments about poor life choices, their spouses' uncomfortable silences. But it also meant saying goodbye to the men who'd taught her to ride a bike, who'd called her his little warrior, who'd slipped her 20s when Richard's checks didn't come even though she knew he could barely afford it. Jake appeared at her elbow with a cup of instant coffee made exactly how she liked it, too much sugar, not enough milk. "We'll figure it out, Mom. We always do." Sarah pulled him close, this boy forced to be a man too soon, and wondered when she'd stop believing that was true. The Riverside funeral home smelled of lilies and lemon polish, a combination that made Sarah's empty stomach churn. She'd managed to find a black dress at Goodwill for $12, a small victory dampened by the safety pin holding the broken zipper and Emma's poorly hidden embarrassment at her mother's appearance. "Chin up," Sarah whispered to her children as they entered. Jake had squeezed into his last year's suit, the pants hitting above his ankles. Emma wore a borrowed dress from a friend. Lily clutched Sarah's hand, overwhelmed by the somber atmosphere. The chapel was nearly empty. Henry Chen hadn't maintained many friendships in his final years, retreating into solitude at the Seahorse Motel. Sarah spotted Michael immediately, impossible to miss in his designer suit, checking his phone even here. Grace sat in the front row with her husband Kenneth, their 3 children dressed like tiny executives. "You came," Michael said, not quite hiding his surprise. His eyes swept over Sarah's safety-pin dress and her children's ill-fitting clothes. "Wasn't sure you'd manage it." "He was our father," Sarah replied evenly. Grace air-kissed her cheek, careful not to smudge her lipstick. "Sarah. You look tired." Single motherhood must be so challenging, she said it like Sarah had chosen to be divorced, like it was a lifestyle option rather than survival. The service was brief. The pastor, who'd clearly never met Henry, delivered generic platitudes about a life well lived, that bore no resemblance to the complicated men Sarah remembered. Her father had been many things: dreamer, failed entrepreneur, stubborn fool, but never generic. Thomas Hartwell, her father's attorney, appeared at her elbow as they filed out. In his 70s with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, he'd handled the Chen family's legal matters for decades. "We need to discuss your father's will," he said quietly. "Can you all meet at my office?" Michael checked his phone. "I have a conference call at 3. Can we make this quick?" An hour later, they sat in Hartwell's wood-paneled office. Sarah kept her children in the waiting room, but she could hear Lily's restless movements through the thin door. "This is straightforward," Hartwell began, adjusting his glasses. "Henry updated his will 6 months ago. To Michael Chen, he leaves his collection of vintage photography equipment and the sum of $75,000. Michael nodded, satisfied. The money would be a nice bonus to his already substantial income. To Grace Chen Yamada, he leaves his library of first edition books and $75,000. Grace smiled tightly. She'd probably hoped for more, but the Yamada money made this merely disappointing rather than devastating. To Sarah Chen, he leaves the Seahorse Motel and all its contents, including any assets found on the property. Silence. Then Michael laughed, a sharp, incredulous sound. "The motel? That dump? It's probably worth $- after you factor in the demolition costs." Grace joined in, her manicured hand covering her mouth. "Oh, Sarah. How perfectly appropriate. Dad always did have an odd sense of humor." "It's not a joke," Hartwell said firmly. Henry was quite specific. "The property goes to Sarah. Because she's the only one desperate enough to take it," Michael said. "That place has been condemned for years. The city's been after Dad to tear it down. It's a health hazard, Grace added. Remember when we visited 5 years ago? The mold, the structural damage, Kenneth had to throw away his shoes afterward. Sarah sat frozen, processing. Her father had left her siblings each $75,000, enough to change her life completely. Enough to fight Richard's custody grab, pay rent, keep the lights on. Instead, she got a rotting building that would cost money she didn't have to demolish. There must be a mistake, she said quietly. Hartwell shook his head. No mistake. Henry also left this. He handed her an envelope with her name written in her father's shaky handwriting. She opened it with trembling fingers. My little warrior, success isn't always what it appears. The seahorse has been my home and my burden. Now it's yours. Look with your heart, not your eyes. Check behind the painted mermaid in room 237. Remember, our greatest treasures are often hidden in plain sight. Love, Dad. Painted mermaid. Grace peered at the letter. He really lost it at the end, didn't he? Dementia, Michael said knowingly. Should have had him evaluated. This will could be challenged on mental competency grounds. Henry was of sound mind, Hartwell interjected firmly. I can attest to that, as can his doctor. Then he was just cruel, Grace said, gathering her purse. Leaving Sarah a worthless building when he knew she was struggling. It's almost vindictive. They filed out, Grace and Michael discussing dinner plans as if Sarah wasn't there. In the parking lot, Michael paused by his Tesla. Look, Sarah, I'll give you $20,000 for it. Cash. Today. You can sign it over and walk away from that mess. $20,000. It would solve her immediate problems but leave her with nothing long-term. Still, it was tempting. What use did she have for a condemned motel? I need to think about it, she said. Michael shrugged. Offer expires at midnight. After that, you're on your own with that disaster. As they drove away in their luxury cars, Sarah stood in the parking lot, her children waiting in their beat-up Honda, and wondered why her father, who'd slipped her money when she needed it most, would leave her this final burden. Sarah stood outside the Seahorse Motel as the morning fog rolled off Highway 91, her children clustered behind her like reluctant ducklings. The place looked worse than she remembered, a two-story L-shaped building with missing roof tiles, plywood-covered windows, and a sign so faded only the ghost of a seahorse remained. The swimming pool had become a concrete crater filled with garbage and rainwater. We're not going in there, are we? Emma asked, her teenager's disdain sharp enough to cut. Mom, this place is literally condemnable. It's an adventure, Sarah said with forced brightness, fumbling with the ring of keys Hartwell had given her. 23 keys for a 20-room motel, nothing was ever simple with Henry Chen. I see rats, Lily announced, pointing to the overflowing dumpster. Those are cats, Jake said quickly, though Sarah suspected Lily was right. The main office door stuck, requiring Sarah's shoulder to force it open. The smell hit them immediately, mildew, decay, and something else, something chemical that made her eyes water. 70s era wood paneling peeled from the walls. The reception desk was buried under years of mail, mostly final notices and city violations. Sarah's phone rang. Michael. Midnight deadline's now 5 p.m., he said without greeting. My business partner wants to see the property. We might go up to $25,000 if you sign today. Why the rush? Why drag it out? You've seen it now. You know it's worthless. Take the money, Sarah. Think of your kids. She was thinking of them, of Jake's two short pants, Emma's borrowed dress, Lily's tear-stained face. $25,000 would buy breathing room. I'll call you back, she said. They explored cautiously. Most rooms were disasters, water damage, broken furniture, walls with holes punched by long-gone tenants. Sarah kept the kids close, terrified of what they might find or what might find them. Room 237 was on the second floor, at the end of the exterior walkway. The door was locked, but the 8th key worked. Inside, it was surprisingly intact, dusty but undamaged, as if frozen in time. And there on the wall above the bed was the painted mermaid her father had mentioned. It was beautiful, actually. A vintage-style advertisement from the motel's heyday, showing a pin-up mermaid perched on a rock, winking at the viewer. SEA Dreams at the Seahorse, curved above her in aqua letters. That's actually cool, Emma admitted grudgingly. Sarah approached the mural, running her hands along the edges. Her father's words echoed, "Look with your heart, not your eyes." What had he meant? "Mom, someone's here," Jake said from the doorway. Alexis had parked next to their Honda. Grace emerged, picking her way across the cracked asphalt in designer heels, Kenneth trailing behind her. "Dear God," Grace said, surveying the motel. "It's worse than I remembered." "Sarah, please tell me you're taking Michael's offer." "I'm still deciding." "Deciding?" Grace's voice pitched higher. "Deciding what?" "Whether to burden your children with this health hazard." "Kenneth, tell her." Kenneth, a soft-spoken man who'd built his family's restaurant empire into a franchise, studied the building with a businessman's eye. "The land might have value," he said carefully. "Highway adjacent, commercial zoning." "Don't encourage her," Grace snapped. "Sarah, be realistic. You can't afford to demolish this place, which the city will require. You can't renovate it. You can't even afford to properly board it up. Take Michael's money." $25,000 won't go far with 3 kids, Sarah countered. "It'll go farther than negative equity," Grace replied. "Do you know what liens are probably on this place? Back taxes. Code violations. Dad lived here for free because no one wanted to deal with the legal nightmare of evicting him." Grace's phone chimed. She glanced at it and smiled. "That's Michael. His partner is very interested in the land. They might go up to 30,000 each. For land worth potentially hundreds of thousands." Sarah asked. Grace's expression hardened. "For land that requires massive investment to access that value. Investment you don't have. Stop being proud, Sarah. You're not in a position to be proud." After they left, Sarah sat on the steps of room 237 while her kids explored the walkway. Her phone had 17 missed calls, Michael, Grace, 2 unknown numbers that were probably creditors, and surprisingly, her ex-husband Richard. She called him back, already exhausted. "I heard about your inheritance," Richard said, and she could hear Brittany coaching him in the background. "A motel. Sarah, that's perfect for my custody case. You're essentially homeless now, dragging our children to a condemned building." Sarah hung up. She didn't have energy for his threats. "Mom." Lily appeared at her elbow. "There's a man downstairs who wants to talk to you." Sarah found a man in a cheap suit photographing the building. "Miss Chen." "Dale Morrison, Morrison Demolition. Your brother asked me to provide a quote for tearing this place down." "I didn't request a quote." "He said you would." "Look, I'll be honest, this is a $100,000 job minimum. Hazmat concerns, permits, disposal. Your brother mentioned you might need financing options." Sarah felt the walls closing in. Michael was already arranging demolition, assuming she'd cave. The pressure from all sides, siblings, ex-husband, financial reality, squeezed tighter with each passing hour. That night, back in their apartment, Sarah lay awake staring at the ceiling. The kids were asleep, but she could hear Emma crying softly, the muffled sobs of a 14-year-old trying to be strong. The eviction notice seemed to glow from the kitchen counter. Her phone showed 3 texts from Michael. The offer was now $35,000, but only if she signed by noon tomorrow. "Stop wasting everyone's time," the last message read. "You know how this ends." Sarah woke to pounding on her apartment door. 6:47 a.m. The kids were still asleep as she stumbled to the peephole, her heart racing. 2 men in suits stood outside, not the cheap suits of city inspectors, but the expensive kind that meant lawyers or worse. "Miss Chen. We represent Pinnacle Development Group. We understand you've inherited the Seahorse Motel property. We'd like to discuss an immediate purchase." She opened the door a crack, leaving the chain on. "It's not even 7 a.m. The taller one smiled without warmth. "Apologies for the early hour. We're prepared to offer 50,000 cash, closing today. My brother sent you. Your brother mentioned the property, yes. But our interest is independent. 50,000, Ms. Chen. Cash. Today. From 35 to 50 overnight. Sarah's suspicion deepened. I need time to consider. Time is a luxury in real estate, the shorter one interrupted. Our client has immediate development plans. This offer expires at noon. After they left, Sarah found her hands shaking as she made coffee. Why the sudden interest? The motel had sat rotting for years with no buyers. Now everyone wanted it immediately. Her phone rang. An unknown number, but she answered anyway. You the Chen woman with the motel? The voice was rough, unfamiliar. Who is this? Building inspector. Got a complaint about trespassing on condemned property. You and your kids were there yesterday. It's my property. Condemned is condemned. Stay off it or I'll have to involve child services. Endangering minors is serious business. The line went dead. Sarah stared at her phone. Someone had called in a complaint. Someone who knew she'd visited with her children. Emma emerged from the bedroom, already dressed for school. Mom. You okay? Fine, sweetheart. Just business stuff. Emma studied her with those two wise eyes. About the motel. Mom, maybe Uncle Michael's right. Maybe we should just take the money. Even her daughter was feeling the pressure. Sarah forced a smile. Get your siblings up. I'll make breakfast. But there was no time for breakfast. Her phone exploded with calls and texts. The property management company for their apartment, wanting to know if she'd come into money that could cover back rent. The utility company, suddenly interested in discussing her past due balance. Word traveled fast in their small city. Then Richard, taking kids to condemned buildings. My lawyer will love this. At the kids' school, the secretary gave Sarah a strange look. Miss Chen. The principal needs to see you. Principal Martinez, usually warm, was formal. We've received concerning reports about your children's living situation. Something about inheriting a condemned motel. We're not living there, Sarah said quickly. We visited once. And exposed them to environmental hazards. According to this complaint, she held up an official-looking document. Miss Chen, we're mandated reporters. If we believe children are in unsafe conditions. Sarah left shaking. Someone had filed a formal complaint with the school. The pressure wasn't just financial now, they were threatening her children. In the parking lot, she called Thomas Hartwell. Something's wrong. Everyone suddenly wants this motel. They're threatening me, calling child services. Come to my office, he said immediately. Bring the letter your father left. An hour later, Sarah sat across from the elderly lawyer as he studied her father's note through his reading glasses. Room 237. The painted mermaid, he murmured. Did you examine it? Briefly. My sister showed up. Your father mentioned that room specifically several times in our meetings. Said it was special, though he never elaborated. Hartwell leaned back. Sarah, in my 40 years of practice, I've learned that when multiple parties desperately want something, it's rarely for the obvious reasons. But it's just a rotting motel. Is it? He pulled out a file. I did some research after our last meeting. The Seahorse Motel sits on 3 acres of highway-adjacent commercial property. But more interesting, in 1987, your father was briefly involved with some colorful characters. There were rumors about hidden assets, though nothing was ever proven. Hidden assets. Your father was many things, but stupid wasn't one of them. He lived in poverty for years rather than sell that motel. Why? Sarah's phone buzzed. Michael again, final offer. 75,000. My partner is losing patience. She showed Hartwell. He frowned. That matches what he left your siblings. Interesting coincidence. What should I do? What does your gut tell you? Her gut told her everyone wanted her to sign immediately. Her gut told her that her father, difficult, proud, stubborn Henry Chen, had kept that motel for a reason. Her gut told her the painted mermaid in room 237 meant something. "I need to go back," she said. "I need to look properly." "Be careful," Hartwell warned. And Sarah? Perhaps don't go alone. But who could she take? She had no friends left. Divorce had a way of making people choose sides, and Richard's charm had won most of them. Her siblings were actively working against her. Her phone rang. "Jake's school." "Miss Chen." "Jake's in the nurse's office." "He's fine, but there was an incident. Some boys were saying things about your family. About the motel. Jake defended you and... Well, we need you to pick him up." Sarah closed her eyes. They were going after her children now, using playground cruelty as another pressure point. The vultures were circling, sensing weakness, pushing from every angle. "I'll be right there," she said. As she drove to get Jake, her phone showed 18 new messages. Michael. Grace. The demolition guy. 2 reporters asking about the condemned motel inheritance, her landlord. The utility company. Richard's lawyer. Everyone wanted an answer. Everyone wanted her to break. Sarah Chen had been many things in her 36 years: wife, mother, waitress, disappointment to her successful siblings. But she'd never been someone who gave up when bullies tried to force her hand. "Not today," she whispered, ignoring the buzzing phone. "Not today." Sarah pulled Jake out of school with a split lip and bruised knuckles, his defiance masking hurt. In the car, he finally spoke. "They said we were trash. That even our dead grandpa knew it, leaving us garbage instead of money." "Your grandfather loved us," Sarah said firmly. "Whatever his reasons, it wasn't cruel." "Then why?" Jake's voice cracked. "Why leave Uncle Michael and Aunt Grace money and us a condemned building?" Sarah didn't have an answer. But looking at her son's wounded faith, she made a decision. "We're going back to the motel. Right now. We're going to find out." "Mom, the building inspector. It's our property. We have every right to be there." She picked up Emma and Lily early, ignoring the school secretary's disapproving look. If everyone wanted to threaten her with child services, she'd at least give her children the truth about their inheritance. The motel looked more forbidding in the afternoon light. Sarah parked directly in front of room 237, her father's cryptic last message burning in her mind. "Look with your heart, not your eyes." "Stay together," she instructed, leading them up the exterior stairs. Room 237 waited, dusty and silent. The painted mermaid watched from the wall, her painted eyes seeming to follow them as they entered. "What are we looking for?" Emma asked. "I don't know," Sarah admitted. "But Grandpa wanted us to find something here." They examined the mural carefully. Up close, Sarah could see it was actually quite skillful, not the amateur work she'd expect in a cheap motel. The mermaid perched on realistic rocks, surrounded by surprisingly detailed ocean waves. The paint had aged but hadn't faded much, protected from direct sunlight. "Mom," Lily said, her eyes look weird. Sarah looked closer. The mermaid's eyes did seem odd, two-dimensional, catching light strangely. She reached up, running her fingers over the painted face. "There's something under the paint," she breathed. A small, hard circle where the mermaid's right eye should be. Jake grabbed a chair, and Sarah climbed up for a better look. Using her car key, she carefully scraped at the paint. It flaked away to reveal. "Is that a lens?" Emma asked. It was. A small camera lens, expertly concealed within the mural. Sarah's heart raced as she scraped more paint away, revealing a thin seam in the wall, a rectangle about the size of a medicine cabinet. "Help me," she said. Together, they worked at the seam with keys and fingernails until something gave. A section of the wall swung inward on hidden hinges, revealing a cavity. Inside was a metal box. Sarah lifted it out with trembling hands. It was heavy, locked with an old-fashioned combination lock. Taped to the top was an envelope marked Sarah in her father's handwriting. She opened the envelope with shaking fingers. My little warrior, if you're reading this, you've looked beyond the surface, something your siblings never learned to do. The combination is your mother's birthday, the day she left us both too soon. What you find inside is my insurance policy. Not the kind from companies, but the kind that protected us when dangerous men wanted what I wouldn't give. There's more, much more, but start here. Be careful who you trust. The men who wanted this 30 years ago may still be watching. All my love, Dad. Sarah's mind raced. Her mother had died when she was 8, cancer, quick and devastating. Her birthday, March 1954. The lock clicked open. Inside the box were 3 things that made no sense together: a leather journal filled with her father's neat handwriting, a collection of photographs showing her father with men she didn't recognize, and a brass key attached to a tag reading Pacific Mutual Safety Deposit, Box 1847. Mom, Jake said quietly, look at this photo. He held up a picture showing her father, much younger, standing next to a man in an expensive suit. Behind them was the Seahorse Motel in its heyday, bright and clean. But it was the background that made Sarah's blood run cold, stacks of what looked like money bundles on a table. The journal's first entry was dated 1987. They came to me with an offer. Use the motel for their meetings, their exchanges. Look the other way. They offered more money than I'd see in a lifetime. But I knew what kind of men they were, what poison they sold. I said no. They didn't accept rejection well. Sarah flipped through pages, her father's story unfolding. The men were drug traffickers who'd wanted to use the motel as a way station. When Henry refused, they'd threatened his family, Sarah, Michael, Grace, and their mother. So Henry had gotten clever. I let them think I'd reconsidered. Welcomed them in. And I documented everything. Every meeting, every exchange, every face. My insurance policy. They couldn't kill me without the evidence going to the FBI. Grandpa was spying on drug dealers. Emma whispered. Sarah continued reading, the pieces falling into place. For 2 years, Henry had gathered evidence while pretending to cooperate. When he finally had enough, he'd made a deal, not with law enforcement, but with the criminals themselves. They'd leave his family alone, and he'd bury the evidence. A Cold War stalemate that had lasted 30 years. The final entry was dated a month ago. I'm dying. The doctors say weeks, maybe months. The men from '87 are mostly dead or imprisoned, but their successors remember. They've been watching, waiting for me to weaken. The evidence I hid is worth millions to them: names, accounts, proof of murders never solved. Sarah, my brave girl, you were always the fighter. Your siblings chase money and status, but you understand what matters. The key leads to documents that will destroy what's left of their organization. But more importantly, it leads to the reward money. 30 years ago, the FBI offered $5 million for information leading to the Delgado cartel's operations. That offer still stands, though the amount has grown. There's more hidden here. The real treasure isn't in a bank, it's in the bones of this place. Room 237 was just the beginning. Trust no one except Thomas Hartwell. He knows more than he said. Protect our family. You're the only one strong enough. Sarah looked up to find her children staring at her, wide-eyed. Mom, Jake said slowly, are you saying Grandpa was hiding evidence about drug dealers? And there's reward money. Before she could answer, her phone rang. Michael. Time's up, Sarah. My partners are at the motel now. Sign the papers or, he paused. Wait, your car's here. Are you inside? I told you to stay away. Through the window, Sarah saw 3 vehicles pulling into the motel parking lot. None of them looked friendly. Sarah grabbed the metal box and shoved it into her bag. Kids, we're leaving. Now. They rushed down the exterior stairs as car doors slammed below. Sarah recognized Michael's Tesla, but the 2 black SUVs were unfamiliar. Men in dark clothing emerged, their purposeful movements setting off every alarm in her head. Back door, she hissed, leading her children through the breezeway to the motel's rear exit. They slipped out as voices rose behind them, Michael arguing with someone, demanding to know where Sarah was. They reached their Honda just as one of the men rounded the corner. Sarah didn't look back, starting the engine and pulling away as calmly as her racing heart would allow. In the rearview mirror, she saw the man speaking into a phone. "Mom, what's happening?" Lily whimpered. "I'll explain everything," Sarah promised, "but first we need somewhere safe." She drove to Thomas Hartwell's office, the only person her father had said to trust. The elderly lawyer took one look at their faces and ushered them into his private conference room, locking the door behind them. Sarah showed him the journal, the photos, the key. Hartwell studied each item with growing amazement. "I knew Henry was involved in something during the late 80s, he said finally. "He came to me once, terrified, asking about witness protection. Then suddenly, everything was fine. He never mentioned it again." "The FBI reward," Sarah said. "Is it real?" Hartwell moved to his computer, fingers flying over keys despite his age. "The Delgado cartel case. Yes, here it is. The reward started at $5 million in 1989 for information leading to prosecution. With interest and additional crimes," he turned the monitor toward them. "Current standing reward, approximately $150 million. Emma gasped. Jake's eyes went wide. Even Lily understood that was a lot of money. "But there's more," Sarah said, showing him the final journal entry. "He mentions treasure in the bones of this place. What does that mean?" "Your father was clever with words," Hartwell mused. "Bones. Foundation, perhaps. Structure." Sarah's phone buzzed constantly, Michael, Grace, unknown numbers. She ignored them all. "We need to go back," she decided. "Tonight. When they're not expecting it." "That's dangerous," Hartwell warned. "So is doing nothing. Those men with Michael, they're not developers. They're cartel. They know something's hidden in that motel." Hartwell was quiet for a moment. Then, "I have something that might help." He disappeared into another room, returning with a rolled blueprint. "Your father gave me this years ago. Said to keep it safe but never explained why. It was the original architectural drawing of the Seahorse Motel from 1962. Sarah spread it on the table, studying the faded lines. Everything looked normal until Jake pointed to a section. "Look, there's a basement marked here. But when we were there, I didn't see any stairs going down." He was right. The blueprint showed a full basement under the main building, accessed through the manager's office. But in all their exploration, they'd seen no sign of it. "Hidden," Sarah breathed. "Just like the wall safe." They spent the next hours at Hartwell's office, planning. He insisted on calling a private security contact, a former detective named Ray Castellano who owed him a favor. Meanwhile, Sarah studied her father's journal more carefully, finding clues she'd missed in the first read. References to "swimming in secrets" appeared multiple times. The pool. Could something be hidden in the old pool? Notes about 237 multiplied made her wonder, was there something in other rooms too? And repeatedly, the phrase, "the mermaid guards more than dreams," appeared in different contexts. As darkness fell, they prepared to return. Hartwell insisted the children stay with his wife, a grandmotherly woman who promised movies and popcorn. Ray Castellano arrived, a solid, gray-haired man with cop eyes who listened to their story without skepticism. "I remember the Delgado case," he said. "Bad people. If they think evidence is in that motel, they won't stop. That's why we need to find it first," Sarah said. They drove in Ray's unmarked sedan, lights off as they approached the motel. The parking lot was empty, but fresh tire tracks suggested recent visitors. They tossed room 237, Ray noted, flashlight beam catching the open door. "Looks like they found your hiding spot." Inside, the mermaid mural was partially destroyed, the wall cavity empty. But they'd been sloppy, focused only on that spot. Sarah knelt by the bed, running her hands along the baseboards. Her father had been thorough, would he hide everything in one place? Got something, she said, finding a loose board. Behind it, another small space. Another key, this one marked pool house, maintenance. The pool house was a small structure beside the empty pool, locked and forgotten. The key worked, revealing a space filled with pool equipment and chemicals. But the blueprint had shown something else. Ray found it, a hatch in the floor, painted to match the concrete. It opened to reveal a ladder descending into darkness. The basement, Sarah whispered. They climbed down into a space that shouldn't exist. The basement wasn't under the main building, it was here, beneath the pool area, connected by tunnels her father must have added over the years. And it was filled with filing cabinets. Dozens of them, each meticulously labeled with dates from 1987 to 1989. Sarah opened one at random, finding photographs, documents, tape recordings, everything her father had mentioned. The evidence that had kept him and his family safe for 30 years. This is it, Ray said, awe in his voice. This is enough to bring down what's left of the Delgado organization. Hell, this solves cold cases going back decades. But there was more. In the corner, a modern safe with a digital lock. The combination wasn't hard to guess, her mother's birthday again. Inside, Sarah found bank documents, account numbers, and a letter. Sarah, if you've made it this far, you've found the evidence. But the real inheritance is in the accounts. The cartel paid me to stay quiet. I took their money but never stayed quiet, I documented everything. The accounts total approximately $50 million in clean, untraceable funds. The FBI reward will add more. Use it wisely. Build the life you deserve. Love, Dad. Sarah sank to the floor, overwhelmed. Her father hadn't just protected them, he'd played a 30-year-long game, turning blood money into a legacy for his family. We need to call the FBI, Ray said. Tonight. Before anyone realizes what we've found. The FBI arrived within 2 hours, a full tactical team that materialized from the darkness like ghosts. Special Agent Diana Morrison, a woman with sharp eyes and graying temples, took charge of the scene with an efficiency that told Sarah this case mattered. We've been watching the Delgado remnants for years, Morrison explained as agents photographed every document. Your father's evidence is the break we've needed. But ma'am, you need to understand, you've just made yourself a target. Sarah was in Hartwell's office, her children safely tucked in the guest room, when her phone rang. Michael. What did you do? His voice was strangled with panic. Those men, they came to my house. They threatened Melissa and the kids. They want to know what you found. Call the police. I can't. They said they're watching. Sarah, they said if you don't return what you took, they'll start with Grace's family, then mine, then come for yours. Sarah's blood chilled. Agent Morrison, monitoring the call, nodded sharply and began making silent gestures to her team. Michael, listen carefully. Get Melissa and the kids, get in your car, and drive to the FBI field office downtown. Don't go anywhere else. Don't stop. FBI. Sarah, what have you? Do it now. Morrison was already on another phone, dispatching units. We're moving on all your family members. These people don't make idle threats. The next hours blurred together. Grace's family was extracted from a restaurant, terrified but unharmed. Michael's family made it to safety, though 2 cars had followed them most of the way. The cartel's response had been swift and vicious, they knew something significant had been found. Sarah watched from a secure room as Morrison coordinated the operation. The motel was now a crime scene, agents cataloging 30 years of evidence. Every document, every photo, every tape was another nail in the cartel's coffin. Your father was brilliant, Morrison said during a brief break. This intelligence is gold. But the cartel won't go down without a fight. We need to put you in protective custody. For how long? Until we round them up. Days, maybe weeks. Sarah thought of her children, already traumatized by divorce and poverty. Now this. There has to be another way. Morrison's phone buzzed. She answered, her face darkening. There's been a development. Someone leaked your location to the media. Within an hour, news vans surrounded Hartwell's office building. The story was irresistible: divorced mother finds fortune in condemned motel, drug cartel connections, FBI involvement. Sarah watched the coverage in horror as reporters revealed details that put her family in even more danger. "We need to move you," Morrison said urgently. But as they prepared to leave, Ray Castellano arrived with worse news. "The pool house is on fire. Someone torched it." The motel, her father's legacy, was burning. Sarah felt rage rise in her chest. They were trying to destroy evidence, intimidate her, erase 30 years of her father's careful work. "The evidence is all documented," Morrison assured her. "We have copies of everything. But this shows they're desperate." Sarah's phone, which the FBI was monitoring, rang again. "Unknown number." "Answer it," Morrison instructed. Ms. Chen, the voice was cultured, calm, terrifying in its reasonableness. "You've created quite a problem. Your father understood the importance of balance. Of mutual assured destruction." "My father is dead." "Yes, and his death upset a delicate ecosystem. We had an understanding, his silence for your family's safety. You've broken that compact. I found evidence of murders, drug trafficking, money laundering. You expect me to ignore that?" A soft laugh. "I expect you to be pragmatic. Like your brother and sister." Sarah's blood froze. "What do you mean? Did you think Michael's tech company succeeded on merit alone? Or that Grace's husband's restaurants expanded so quickly without assistance? Your father's deal protected them, allowed them to flourish. Without it." The implication was clear. Her siblings had unknowingly benefited from the cartel's influence, their businesses subtly supported by dirty money. If that connection was exposed, they'd lose everything. "You're lying. Check their contracts, their investors. Shell companies leading back to shell companies. All legal on the surface, all tainted beneath. Your father knew. It's why he kept his silence even when he hated us." Morrison was gesturing frantically, her team tracing the call. "What do you want?" Sarah asked. "The physical evidence. We know the FBI has copies, but the originals have sentimental value. Return them, and your family's secrets stay buried. Refuse, and by tomorrow, your brother and sister will be under investigation for money laundering. Their children will watch their parents arrested, just as yours watched you struggle. You're threatening children now. I'm offering a choice. You have 12 hours. The line went dead. Morrison immediately began damage control, but Sarah could see the truth in the agent's eyes. If the cartel's claims about her siblings were true, Michael and Grace faced potential prosecution. They'd been unwitting pawns, but ignorance wasn't always a defense. "Mom." Emma stood in the doorway, having slipped away from Hartwell's wife. "I heard shouting. Are Uncle Michael and Aunt Grace in trouble?" Sarah pulled her daughter close. The weight of her father's secret wasn't just evidence and money, it was a web that had entangled her entire family. The cartel had played a long game, using her siblings' ambition against them, creating leverage for a moment like this. "We're going to fix this," Sarah promised, though she had no idea how. Through the window, she could see smoke rising in the distance. The Seahorse Motel, her inheritance, her father's life work, was burning. And with it, perhaps, any chance of her family emerging from this intact. Morrison's phone rang. She listened, then turned to Sarah with a grim expression. "There's been another development. Someone just posted your children's school information online. We need to move. Now." The FBI safe house was a nondescript ranch home in the suburbs, where Sarah and her children spent a sleepless night under guard. Agent Morrison worked through the night, her team investigating the cartel's claims about Michael and Grace's businesses. At dawn, Morrison entered with a laptop and grim expression. "We need to talk." She showed Sarah a web of financial documents. Michael's tech company had received crucial early funding from Pinnacle Investments, a firm that, 3 shells deep, traced back to cartel money. Grace's husband's restaurant expansion was financed by commercial loans from banks the cartel had compromised. They never knew, Morrison said. The cartel was subtle, patient. Your father's silence protected them from ever discovering the truth. Sarah stared at the evidence. Her successful siblings, who'd mocked her struggles, had built their dreams on poisoned foundations. Can you protect them? If they cooperate. Possibly. But Sarah, there's something else. Morrison pulled up another file. We've been analyzing the documents from the basement. Your father didn't just document the cartel's crimes, he documented where they hid their assets. The screen showed pages from her father's journal, entries Sarah hadn't had time to read. Detailed notes about money laundering operations, including the crown jewel, the location of the cartel's emergency fund. Based on his intelligence, we believe there's approximately $100 million in bearer bonds and gold hidden somewhere in that motel. The cartel's retirement fund, meant to finance their escape if law enforcement ever got too close. Sarah's mind reeled. That's what they really want. Not just the evidence, their money. Money they can't access without drawing attention. Your father was brilliant, he hid their escape fund in his own motel, knowing they couldn't retrieve it without exposing themselves. But the motel is burning. The fire department contained it to the pool house. The main structure is damaged but standing. Morrison leaned forward. Sarah, we need you to help us find that money. With it, we can completely dismantle their operations. Sarah thought of her children, sleeping in a strange bed, their lives upended. She thought of her siblings, about to lose everything they'd built. And she thought of her father, who'd carried this burden alone for 30 years. There was something in his letter, she said slowly. About the bones of the place. And repeated references to swimming in secrets. Morrison nodded. We've had agents searching all night. Found nothing. Because they're looking in the wrong place. Sarah grabbed paper, sketching the motel's layout from memory. The pool isn't just empty, it's been filled with concrete. I noticed it yesterday but didn't think. Dad filled in the pool sometime in the early 90s. Said it was too expensive to maintain. Morrison's eyes widened. He buried it. The cartel's money is in the pool. Within hours, they had a plan. The cartel expected Sarah to deliver the original evidence by the deadline. She would, but on FBI terms. It's dangerous, Morrison warned. Even with our full support. My family is already in danger, Sarah interrupted. At least this way, we end it. The meeting was set for the motel at sunset. Sarah arrived first, wearing a wire, agents positioned around the perimeter. The fire damage gave the place an apocalyptic feel, smoke still rising from the pool house ruins. 3 cars arrived precisely at 8. The men from the phone emerged, elegant, 60-ish, with dead eyes. Carlos Delgado, nephew of the original cartel leader. Ms. Chen. You've caused considerable disruption. I want guarantees. My family is left alone. All of them. Once we have what's ours, you'll never hear from us again. Sarah gestured to the trunk of her car, where boxes of originals sat. Delgado's men began loading them into their vehicles. Your father was smarter than we gave him credit for, Delgado said conversationally. Hiding our emergency fund where we couldn't touch it. We searched that motel dozens of times over the years. I don't know what you mean. Delgado smiled coldly. The FBI is listening, I assume. No matter. By the time they process those documents, we'll be gone. The money your father stole. He didn't steal anything, Sarah said firmly. You paid him for silence. He just chose a creative banking method. Buried in concrete. Yes, we figured it out eventually. Your father's little joke, swimming in secrets, diving into wealth. The pool. Sirens wailed in the distance. Delgado frowned. That's our cue to leave. Goodbye, Ms. Chen. Enjoy your reward money. You've earned it. But as his men started their cars, nothing happened. The engines wouldn't turn over. Now, Morrison's voice crackled through hidden speakers. FBI agents swarmed from every direction. Delgado reached for a weapon but found Sarah already backing away, no longer the scared divorced mother but a woman who'd found her father's courage. "You knew," Delgado snarled as agents forced him to the ground. "The originals are evidence," Sarah said. "But you're right, Dad was smarter than you thought. He made copies of copies, hid them everywhere. You could burn down the whole motel and it wouldn't matter." As they led Delgado away, he turned back. "Your siblings will be fine," Morrison interrupted. "They've already agreed to cooperate fully. Amazing how quickly people choose the right side when given good options." Sarah stood in the ruins of her inheritance, watching the architects of her family's fear driven away in federal vehicles. Tomorrow, jackhammers would tear into the concrete pool, recovering millions in cartel assets. The reward money would follow, enough to secure her children's future forever. But tonight, she just breathed. For the first time in memory, truly breathed. Her phone buzzed. "Jake, Mom, are you okay? When can we come home?" Home. She looked at the damaged motel, this place of secrets and sacrifice. It would need massive renovation, but the bones were good. Strong. "Soon, baby," she texted back. "We're going to build something amazing." The jackhammers broke through the pool's concrete at dawn, FBI agents and construction crews working in tandem. Sarah watched from the motel's upper walkway, her children beside her, as years of secrets came to light. The first metal case emerged at 9 feet down. Then another. And another. By noon, they'd extracted 17 waterproof cases containing bearer bonds, gold coins, and cash in various currencies. Agent Morrison's preliminary count put the value at $97 million. "It's really there," Emma breathed. Grandpa really hid a fortune. But Sarah's attention was drawn to her siblings, standing by the police tape. Michael looked haggard, his usual confidence shattered. Grace clutched Kenneth's arm, her perfect composure cracked. They'd spent the night in FBI custody, learning how deeply the cartel had infiltrated their lives. "I need to talk to them," Sarah told Morrison. "That's not advisable. They're my family." Morrison nodded reluctantly. 5 minutes. Sarah approached her siblings, seeing them clearly for perhaps the first time. Not the golden children who'd succeeded while she struggled, but victims of a different kind of trap. "Sarah," Michael started, then stopped. What was there to say? "I'm sorry," Grace whispered. "We didn't know. All these years, we thought we'd earned our success, but it was tainted." "You couldn't have known," Sarah said gently. "Dad made sure of that. He protected you from this," Michael said bitterly. "We got the money, the success, the contamination. You got the truth." "I got 30 years of struggle first," Sarah reminded him. 30 years of you both looking down on me. We were fools." Grace's tears ruined her makeup. "You were the only one who succeeded honestly." Morrison appeared. "We've reached a deal with the prosecutors. Your siblings will forfeit assets derived from cartel connections but face no criminal charges. They'll have to rebuild, but they'll be free." Sarah made a decision that would have seemed impossible days ago. "The motel is worth about $2 million in land value. I want to give them each a third." Michael stared. "After how we treated you." "Because of how you'll treat me going forward," Sarah said firmly. "We're family. We start fresh, all of us." Later, as the last cases emerged from the pool, Sarah found herself in room 237. The mermaid mural was destroyed, but she'd commissioned an artist to recreate it, not to hide secrets this time, but to honor the woman who'd guarded them. Thomas Hartwell arrived with documents. "The FBI has confirmed the reward, $150 million for evidence leading to the Delgado cartel's prosecution. After taxes, you'll net approximately $90 million. Combined with the recovered assets going through civil forfeiture that you'll receive a percentage of, your total inheritance exceeds $200 million. $200 million. The number seemed fictional. "What will you do?" Hartwell asked gently. Sarah had been thinking about this all night. First, trust funds for the kids' education. Then, help for Michael and Grace to rebuild ethically. After that, she looked around the damaged motel. I want to renovate this place. Not as a motel, but as a community center. Swimming programs for kids who couldn't otherwise afford them. Job training. A memorial to my father, not the keeper of secrets, but the man who protected his family the only way he knew how. That's beautiful, Hartwell said. Your father would be proud. That evening, Sarah gathered her children in their apartment, their last night there. Tomorrow, they'd move to a rental house while searching for something permanent. Not a mansion. Sarah had no interest in the excess that had trapped her siblings, but something solid, safe, theirs. I need to ask you all something, she said. We're about to have money. A lot of money. But I watched what the wrong kind of wealth did to Uncle Michael and Aunt Grace. So I want us to make decisions together about how to use this responsibility. Can I get a new bike? Lily asked hopefully. Yes, Sarah laughed. You can get a new bike. But I mean bigger things. How do we use this to help others? How do we stay who we are? Jake, wise beyond his years, spoke first. Grandpa hid money to protect his family. Maybe we use ours to protect other families. Emma nodded. Like scholarships for kids whose parents are struggling. Or helping single moms like you were. The Sarah Chen Foundation, Lily announced. No, wait, the Henry Chen Foundation. For Grandpa. Sarah pulled them close. Perfect. We'll do it together. Her phone rang. Richard, who'd been conspicuously silent since news of her inheritance broke. Sarah, I heard about your situation. About the money. I think we should discuss the children's future. Richard, she interrupted calmly. My lawyer will send you documentation of a trust fund established for each child's education and future. You'll continue paying your court-ordered child support, which will also go into their trusts. Any attempt to modify custody based on my changed circumstances will be met with significant legal response. Have a good evening. She hung up, feeling lighter than she had in years. Through the window, she could see the motel in the distance, lit by work lights as FBI agents finished their investigation. Tomorrow, the real work would begin, healing her family, honoring her father's sacrifice, building something worthy of the secrets that had been kept. Mom, Jake said quietly. Do you think Grandpa knew this would happen? That you'd find everything? Sarah thought about the men who'd called her his little warrior, who'd seen strength in her that she'd never seen in herself. Yes, she said. I think he knew exactly who I'd become when tested. He just had to wait for me to know it too. The night was warm, filled with the sound of her children planning their future. For the first time since the divorce, Sarah Chen felt truly wealthy, not because of hidden millions, but because she'd discovered what her father always knew: real treasure wasn't what you owned, but who you chose to be. 6 months later, Sarah stood before the transformed Seahorse Community Center, watching her father's dream become reality. The renovation had been extensive, the old motel's bones remained, but everything else gleamed with new purpose. Where rooms once sheltered secrets, classrooms now hosted ESL courses and job training. The pool, once a concrete grave for blood money, sparkled blue under the California sun. The ribbon-cutting ceremony starts in 20 minutes, her assistant Maria reminded her. Maria was a single mother of 2 who'd been the community center's first hire. Sarah had found her working 3 jobs to make ends meet, just as she once had. Thank you. Are my siblings here? Mr. Chen is setting up the sound system. Mrs. Yamada is in the kitchen with the catering staff. Sarah smiled. Michael had discovered an aptitude for hands-on work after his tech company folded. He now ran a small electronics repair shop, honest work that seemed to suit him better than his previous high-pressure life. Grace had divorced Kenneth, the shame of their tainted success proving too much for his family's reputation, but had found her footing teaching cooking classes. Both had accepted Sarah's offer of financial help to restart their lives, but more importantly, they'd accepted her as the sister they'd once dismissed. The media had dubbed her transformation the motel millionaire's redemption, but Sarah avoided most interviews. She had no interest in fame, only in the work. Mom. Emma called from across the courtyard. At 15, she'd grown even taller, her volleyball skills earning her a spot on an elite team, one Sarah could now afford without sacrifice. The mayor's here. Sarah straightened her simple blue dress. She still shopped at regular stores, much to her financial advisor's amusement, and went to greet the officials. The ceremony was a blur of speeches and handshakes, but one moment stood out. "I'd like to invite someone special to say a few words," Sarah announced. Elena Cortez. A woman in her 50s approached the microphone, nervous but determined. "6 months ago, I was living in my car with my teenage son after my husband died and left us with medical debt. Ms. Chen found us at the food bank and offered not just money, but dignity. A job, temporary housing, and help getting back on our feet. This place, it's not just a building. It's hope." The crowd applauded, but Sarah's eyes were on her children in the front row. Jake had started a peer tutoring program at school. Lily volunteered at the animal shelter every weekend. They understood what their windfall meant, not privilege, but responsibility. After the ceremony, as families explored the facilities and children splashed in the pool, Agent Morrison appeared at Sarah's elbow. Quite a transformation from that scared woman in a waitress uniform. Sarah laughed. "I still have the uniform. Keeps me grounded. The Delgado trials are going well. Your father's evidence has led to 47 convictions so far. International operations are being dismantled. He'd be proud." "I hope so." Morrison handed her an envelope. "This came through official channels. Thought you should see it." Inside was a letter from Carlos Delgado, written from federal prison. "Ms. Chen, your father once told me that true power wasn't in wealth or fear, but in choosing what kind of person to be regardless of circumstances. I thought him naive. I see now who was naive. You could have taken the money and disappeared. Instead, you honor a man who kept secrets by creating transparency. You've turned blood money into life changes. I have 25 years to think about my choices. You've given me much to consider. C. Delgado." Sarah folded the letter carefully. Even their enemies could learn, could change. That was the real victory. "Sarah." Thomas Hartwell approached, now a regular volunteer at the center's legal clinic. "Someone here wants to meet you." He led her to an elderly Latina woman waiting by the memorial wall, a beautiful mosaic featuring photos of Henry Chen throughout his life, from young immigrant to proud grandfather. "I knew your father," the woman said in accented English. "In 1987, my son was mixed up with those bad men. Henry could have turned him in, had evidence. Instead, he helped my boy escape, start fresh. Gave him bus money, a letter of recommendation for a job in Oregon." She grasped Sarah's hands. "My son is a teacher now. Has 4 children. Because your father saw a young man worth saving, not just a criminal." Sarah embraced the woman, understanding flooding through her. Her father hadn't just gathered evidence, he'd made choices about how to use it, saving who he could while protecting his family. "There's something else," Hartwell said quietly. "We've had an offer on the vacant lot next door. A developer wants to build luxury condos." "No," Sarah said immediately. "We buy it. Expand the center. Maybe affordable housing for single parents transitioning back to work. That's a $15 million property. Then we'd better make it worth $15 million in changed lives." As the sun set over the center, Sarah found herself on the upper walkway where she'd once discovered her father's first secret. The painted mermaid was back, watching over room 237, which had been converted into a small museum about Henry Chen's life, the public story of an immigrant's success, with the secret history carefully edited to protect ongoing investigations. Her children found her there, as she knew they would. "Good day?" Jake asked. "The best," Sarah replied. "But also hard. I keep thinking about all the people still struggling, all the single parents working multiple jobs, all the kids who think they're not worth investing in." "We can't help everyone," Emma said pragmatically. "No," Sarah agreed. "But we can help more than we did yesterday. And tomorrow, more than today." Lily, now 9 and blooming with confidence, tugged on Sarah's hand. "Mom, look, shooting star." They all looked up, making wishes. Sarah didn't need to wish for wealth or success, those had come in ways she'd never imagined. Instead, she wished for wisdom to use them well, for her children to stay grounded, for her father's sacrifice to keep bearing fruit. "What did you wish for?" Lily asked. "If I tell you, it won't come true," Sarah said, pulling her close. But in her heart, she knew it already had. She'd wished to be the person her father always believed she could be, someone who looked beyond surfaces, who chose integrity over ease, who turned curses into blessings. Someone worthy of the trust he'd placed in her when he left her a crumbling motel and a mermaid's secret smile. 1 year after discovering the vault, Sarah Chen stood in the community center's main hall, addressing a crowd of 200. The annual Henry Chen Memorial Gala had drawn local politicians, business leaders, and most importantly, the families whose lives had been transformed by the center's programs. "My father once wrote that success isn't always what it appears," Sarah began, her voice steady and warm. He lived that truth, choosing purpose over appearance, service over status. This center stands as proof that hidden treasures aren't always gold or bonds, sometimes they're the opportunities we create for others. The applause was genuine, heartfelt. In the audience, she spotted familiar faces that marked her journey. Agent Morrison, now retired and running the center's security training program. Thomas Hartwell, whose legal clinic had helped dozens of families navigate immigration and custody issues. Ray Castellano, who taught self-defense classes to single mothers. Her siblings sat at the family table. Michael now bore calluses on his hands from honest work, his arrogance replaced by quiet dignity. Grace had opened a small restaurant featuring their mother's recipes, building a reputation on food rather than connections. Both had donated their shares from the motel's land sale back to the center, choosing redemption over profit. "This year, we've helped 147 families find stable housing," Sarah continued. "Provided job training to 89 single parents. Offered free childcare to 203 working mothers. And we're just getting started." She paused, seeing her children in the front row. Emma, now 16, had started a mentorship program pairing successful teens with struggling middle schoolers. Jake, 14, ran coding workshops for underprivileged kids. Lily, 10, had organized a neighborhood beautification project that transformed vacant lots into community gardens. "But tonight isn't about numbers," Sarah said. "It's about faces. Stories. Transformations." She introduced speaker after speaker, people who'd walked through the center's doors desperate and left empowered. A father who'd learned welding and now employed other recovering addicts. A teenager who'd escaped gang life through the music program. And now studied at Juilliard. A grandmother raising her grandchildren who'd found support and respite. Richard sat at a back table, his young wife notably absent. Their divorce had been finalized 6 months ago. Brittany had left him for someone wealthier once Sarah's millions were no longer accessible through him. He'd been humbled by the experience, finally understanding what he'd thrown away. Sarah had allowed him to attend tonight because their children had asked, wanting their father to see what real success looked like. "Before we close," Sarah announced, "I have one more story to share. Yesterday, I received this letter." She unfolded a paper with trembling hands. "Dear Miss Chen, you don't know me, but your father saved my life in 1988. I was 19, pregnant, and trapped in an abusive relationship with one of the cartel members. Your father saw bruises I thought I'd hidden. He helped me escape, gave me money for a bus ticket and a new start. I've thought about him often over the years, wanted to thank him but was too afraid to make contact. When I read about you in the news, about what you've built, I knew I had to write. I became a nurse. Raised 2 wonderful sons. Built a life of purpose, not fear. Your father planted seeds of kindness that are still growing. Through you, through this center, his garden has become a forest. With gratitude, Monica Reeves." Sarah looked up, tears glistening. "My father kept many secrets. Some were dark, born of necessity and survival. But others, like Monica's story, were acts of grace he never spoke about. Every person we help honors those quiet kindnesses." After the gala, as guests mingled and donated generously to the center's expansion fund, Sarah found herself in the memorial garden they'd built where the old pool house had burned. A fountain now bubbled where secrets had once hidden, its inscription reading, "From hidden depths, living waters flow." "Mom." Jake appeared at her side. "There's someone who wants to meet you." A young woman waited nervously, holding a baby. She looked exhausted, scared, familiar in a way that made Sarah's chest tighten. She saw her own past self in those tired eyes. "Miss Chen. I'm sorry to bother you. I heard about what you do here. I'm being evicted, my ex won't pay support, I lost my job because I couldn't afford daycare, and I don't know what to do." Sarah took the woman's hands, feeling the calluses from restaurant work, seeing the safety pin holding her coat closed, small signs of struggle she knew intimately. "What's your name?" "Julia." "This is my daughter, Sophia." "Well, Julia, you've come to the right place. Let's go to my office and talk about how we can help. And I want you to know, you're not bothering me. You're exactly why we're here." As she led Julia inside, Sarah caught her reflection in the glass doors. She looked older, yes, but also stronger. The haunted exhaustion that had marked her waitressing days was gone, replaced by purpose and peace. Her phone buzzed with a text from Lily, "Movie night at home. I picked pizza toppings." Home. Not the cramped apartment with its water stains and broken dreams, but a modest 4-bedroom house in a safe neighborhood. Not a mansion, Sarah had seen what excess could do, but a real home where her children felt secure and loved. "Can we schedule the meeting for tomorrow?" Sarah asked Julia gently. "I have a very important appointment with my kids and a pizza." Julia smiled, the first real smile Sarah had seen from her. "Of course. Thank you. Just knowing someone will listen. It helps." As Sarah drove home, she passed the old Riverside Diner. It had closed 6 months ago, but she'd bought the building, planning to turn it into a job training restaurant where single parents could learn skills while earning living wages. Gary, her former manager, had applied to run it. Life had humbled him too, and Sarah believed in second chances. The Seahorse Motel sign still stood beside the community center, restored to its former neon glory. Some had suggested removing it, but Sarah insisted on keeping it. It reminded everyone that beautiful things could rise from broken places. At home, her children had set up movie night in the living room, not the massive theater room her financial advisor had suggested, but a cozy space where they could pile together on one couch. As they debated movie choices and Lily negotiated for extra pizza slices, Sarah marveled at how normal it all felt. "Mom," Emma said during a quiet moment, "do you ever think about what would have happened if you'd just taken Uncle Michael's first offer? The 20,000. Sarah considered it. "We'd have survived a little longer. Maybe. But we wouldn't have discovered who we really are. Who Grandpa really was. Sometimes the greatest gifts come wrapped in the ugliest packages. Like the motel," Jake added. "Exactly like the motel." As the movie played and her children dozed off one by one, Sarah thought about hidden treasures and family legacies. Her father had left her more than money or evidence or property. He'd left her a chance to choose, between easy and right, between surface and depth, between fear and faith. She'd chosen faith, and in doing so, had discovered that the real vault hadn't been hidden behind a mermaid's painted smile. It had been inside her all along, waiting for the right key to unlock it. The key had been courage. The treasure had been becoming who she was meant to be. And the inheritance. It wasn't just the millions that now flowed through the community center, changing lives daily. It was the proof that one person, choosing love over fear, could transform a curse into a blessing, a burden into a gift, a crumbling motel into a beacon of hope. Outside, the California stars shone bright and clear. Somewhere among them, Sarah liked to think, Henry Chen was smiling, watching his little warrior shape a legacy worthy of all the secrets he'd kept and all the dreams he'd dared to dream. The motel had been just the beginning. The real story, of redemption, purpose, and the true meaning of wealth, would continue as long as there were struggling mothers who needed hope, children who needed chances, and families who needed to believe that their circumstances didn't define their worth. Sarah Chen, once a divorced mother mocked for inheriting junk, had become exactly what her father always knew she could be, someone who looked deeper, loved harder, and built higher than anyone had thought possible. And that was a fortune no vault could contain.